And thicker cloud there for the east of England. Into the southeast, 1 or 2 showers about first thing, likewise for West Wales and Cornwall. But these are the exceptions, I think, for the vast majority. Blue skies and patchy cloud around first thing, but mostly dry. Now, as temperatures rise through the morning, there's always the possibility of the odd shower breaking out once again across eastern England. But for many, it's a fine and bright day. Still on the cool side, but the winds won't be quite as brisk. So I think it's going to feel a bit more pleasant. Temperatures of 18 Celsius, perhaps 19 in the south, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Another chilly start to the day on Thursday. Plenty of fine weather first thing. But in the west, we've got the cloud building. The wind picks up. Outbreaks of rain push into Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales by lunchtime. And in the east, it turns cloudy by the afternoon as well. That rain clears to showers on Friday and into Saturday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have said Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christys tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
He's got a knife. Doesn't it? Yeah, hello, please.
You will not believe how the courts dealt with the crazed knifeman who wanted to stab Jews in broad daylight. Plus... Nigel Farage is attacked again and
I very much hope that the polling industry becomes honest. Otherwise, I'll have a fight with them.
Are opinion pollsters suppressing the reform vote? Also,
and they're building this sort of Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto where anything you want can go in it. None of it is costed.
Well, Starmer says the Tory manifesto is as bad as Corbyn's.
We should treat, if you like, the 2017 manifesto as our foundational document.
Well, the Labour leader backed Corbyn's manifesto also.
Our plan is clear. We will halve migration as we have halved inflation and then reduce it every single year.
I pick apart the party's immigration promises. Do you really believe any of them? And
the Conservative Party have so poisoned Britain's relationship with our nearest neighbours, our allies. They've undermined trust.
A vote for the Lib Dems is now a vote to rejoin the EU, apparently, but
the Muslim Vote is an initiative set up by organisations and individuals here in the UK to try and unite the Muslim community's electoral response.
New polls show the Muslim vote may have collapsed. Good news for Labour?
For the rest of my life, all I wanna do is make you proud of me.
President Biden's away with the fairies again. And animal rights protesters target the king. On my panel tonight, it's columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. We've got the Spectator's Freddie Gray and author Amy Nicole-Turner. Oh, yes, and can you spot what's wrong with this? Take a look at that. Take a good look at it. Yeah, I want you to tell me what's wrong with that image. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. On immigration, liars, liars, pants on fire. Next.
Good evening with GB News, and the latest top story is that the Hamas terror group has called for a complete halt to the fighting in Gaza. In a statement, the group and its Palestinian Islamic Jihad allies expressed readiness to positively reach a deal to end the war in Gaza. It proposes a 6-week ceasefire that would become permanent. And that comes after the UN Security Council backed a 3-phase plan, which includes the release of hostages and the withdrawal of Israeli forces. Last night, Hamas accepted a ceasefire proposal that was passed by the United Nations. Well, brokers Qatar and Egypt have said tonight they would coordinate with both parties concerned regarding next steps. We'll keep you posted on what happens in the Middle East tonight. Here at home, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has condemned the attack on Nigel Farage after objects were thrown at him during a campaign event this morning. Police have arrested a 28-year-old man on suspicion of public order offences. It's understood a coffee cup and possibly building materials, narrowly missing the Reform UK leader who was on top of his party's battle bus in Barnsley Town Centre in Yorkshire at the time. Mr Farage was addressing his supporters when he was interrupted by demonstrators. He said he'd been warned by police not to get off the bus. Well, it's Manifesto Week, and Rishi Sunak launched the Conservative election manifesto today, saying that he understood people were frustrated with the Tories. The Prime Minister promised, therefore, a multi-billion-pound package of tax cuts, including a reduction in national insurance. The pledges amounting to a total of more than £17 billion in cuts by 2030. There's also help for first-time buyers with changes to stamp duty and a pledge for a new scheme to Help to Buy. Well, there was a promise to address the housing shortage as well by building 1.6 million new homes, and £8.3 billion has been set aside to fix potholes and resurface Britain's roads. There's also, the Tories said, going to be a total ban on smartphones in schools. And on immigration, there's a promise to get flights off the ground to Rwanda every month, with Rishi Sunak saying the deterrent would be a key part of Britain's migration plan, clearing the asylum backlog within 6 months. Well, responding to that Tory manifesto, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said the Conservatives' plans will lead to a second Tory mortgage bombshell.
It is true that under the Conservatives, the welfare bill has spiralled. Since 2019, spending on benefits to support disabled people and those with health conditions has risen in real terms by £20 billion. And under Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, the taxpayer has been losing £1 million every single hour to benefit fraud and error.
Now, as you've been hearing, a protest group has vandalised a new portrait of His Majesty the King. Two members of a protest group called Animal Rising entered the London Gallery and stuck images across the painting, although it is covered in a pane of glass, from the animated series Wallace and Gromit. The group saying it was calling attention to what it says is the poor treatment of animals, in its view, on farms. It says they targeted His Majesty the King due to his position as a royal patron of the RSPCA. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Pleasure to be back with you this evening. Right, so, for many people, this is the immigration election. We have started to get full-blooded policies and manifestos on immigration. The Conservatives launched their manifesto today, and here's what Mr Sunak had to say.
Last year, we announced changes which mean 300,000 people who were previously eligible to come here now can't. And we will introduce a migration cap that means Parliament, your elected representatives, will vote on how many people should be able to come here every year. Our plan is clear. We will halve migration as we have halved inflation and then reduce it every single year.
Well, I reckon that halving immigration from its current levels would mean 324,500 net every year would be the result. I think many people might still think that's too high. The Tories also want to work with other countries to rewrite asylum treaties, put on regular flights to Rwanda, prioritise national security over ECHR membership, but nothing on actually leaving the ECHR, stop illegal immigrants challenging deportations, clear the asylum backlog and cut the use of migrant hotels, and put a legal cap on migration that will be reduced every year. So that's what they are saying they want to do. Labour's full manifesto will be out on Thursday, I believe, but here's what Starmer has said so far.
Well, immigration is a sort of record high under this government, a complete failure. We need to bring it down. Underpinning the number is the fact that we haven't got the skills in this country that we need. So we need to fix the skills strategy, but we've also got to come down on bad bosses. And so we want to ban bad bosses from recruiting from abroad. So we'll have a single enforcement agency going into premises. If there's a breach of labour market rules, then that means, I'm afraid, for that company, for that business, you're not going to get a licence to bring people in from another country. So skills agenda, but also bearing down on those bad bosses. We're going to ban them from bringing people in.
All right. He's also said a thing or two on illegal immigration.
Illegal migration is a test of seriousness for all governments and would-be governments, and not just here, right across the world. A symbol, as I said in my conference speech last year, of a more volatile world, an age of insecurity.
All right, I mean, there's no policy there at the moment, but we will wait and see, won't we? The Lib Dems have put this forward. This is interesting. Scrap the Illegal Migration Act, establish a dedicated unit to make asylum decisions which exist outside of the Home Office, allow asylum seekers to work in the UK if they have been waiting more than 3 months, and negotiate low-cost, fast-tracked work visas to tackle labour shortages in key economic sectors. Oh, yeah, and basically rejoin the EU.
We believe in the long term, we need to be back at the heart of Europe. But we're being really clear that we're not going to pretend that's going to be easy. Regrettably, the Conservative Party have so poisoned Britain's relationship with our nearest neighbours, our allies. They've undermined trust. And when I speak to European politicians, regrettably, they don't trust the United Kingdom anymore. And how sad is that?
OK, we will be talking about that in more detail a bit later in the show. But on to reform now. They are due to publish their full manifesto, as I understand it anyway, next Monday. But here are some snippets.
Yes, I'm disappointed, very disappointed in what the government's done in immigration. People voted for lower numbers. We've got net migration of 750,000 a year for the last 2 years. This is not what people voted for. It isn't a failure of Brexit, it's a failure of the Conservative government.
They say they want net zero immigration and...
So what we need to do is we need to incentivise business
to say, actually, if you want to employ people from overseas, that's fine, but you've got to pay a price for it.
There's that old business immigration tax. So, look, there we are, OK? Those are the main thrusts of immigration policies that we've got so far. The big question on this, I suppose, is who do you trust when it comes to immigration? Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. I am joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I have also got the Spectator's Freddie Gray making his debut on our sofa this evening, so thank you very much. And author, of course, Amy Nicole-Turner. Freddie, I might as well start with you. Look, who do you trust more when it comes to sorting out immigration?
There are no good options, it seems to me.
None of the above.
None of the above. You have a Tory party who make good-sounding promises that nobody believes in. You have a Liberal Democrat Party making commitments that everybody thinks will be a disaster, aside from a few people who are quite radically to the left on immigration. And you have a Labour Party that doesn't really seem to have a very clear plan at all. And then you have Reform who make bold noises, but a lot of people just don't know whether they'll be effectively able to govern. So there's nobody who clearly represents what most British people want.
I would argue, Esther, I'll come to you on this now, that actually what the Lib Dems have put forward so far, many people might regard as being quite dangerous. So you would have asylum seekers being allowed to work straight away, getting rid of the Illegal Migration Act, paving the way to rejoin the European Union, so we could conceivably have additional free movement on top of the levels of immigration that we've already got from other countries as well. And a deportations office that would be outside of the Home Office's jurisdiction. Well, look, who populates that office? It's probably going to be activists, I would have thought. What do you think about all of that?
I mean, the Lib Dems manifesto is completely adrift from reality, so I don't think we should treat it with any seriousness. I think, the Lib Dems don't really talk about immigration in the context of social integration. So they treat human beings like they're robots. You just want to import people from wherever in the world because big business needs cheap labour. Forget about the British people whose wages are being undercut by this influx of cheap labour. But then they don't question what values are these people bringing, where are they coming from, how will they integrate, will they actually adopt our values? The left seems to care about ethnic minorities and LGBT rights and stuff like that. If you're bringing in people from other parts of the world that don't believe in any of those things, the kinds of equality that we uphold, they would have a lot to answer for. So I don't take the Lib Dems seriously. The Labour Party are actually sounding a lot like the Conservatives, ironically. I think every day George Galloway's two cheeks of the same bum just become more and more true. And Reform, again, they're making the right noises. I think most people would agree with them. But do they have the infrastructure to make it happen? I guess most of the country are thinking, what do we have to lose? OK, all right. Amy, your views on this. I mean, we've got Sunak saying he wants to halve net migration. By my calculations, that would make it still around 325,000 people a year. I think many people would still regard that as too high.
But I don't understand why people see it as too high. Is it a perception or is it evidenced? Because all the legal migration that we've had was in response to skills shortages. We needed those people to come and work here.
Yes,
now,
we need all those Uber drivers and Deliveroo drivers. Here's the thing. Over the last 2 years, the data on gov.uk contradicts exactly what you're saying. Over the last 2 years, there have been 3 million visas that have been handed out from the UK. Of those 3 million visas, 11% have been skilled workers, and 30% have been students, 50% of whom end up remaining in the UK for over 2 years after they graduate. So this notion that they're skilled workers, I'm sorry, that is not the truth. The vast majority of them come from Nigeria and Pakistan, and most of them either go into the underbelly of British society or do sort of gig economy work like Deliveroo.
And I think the argument might be, Amy, as well, that Labour possibly just don't care about that.
I think that Labour put forward a really good suggestion when they said we need to train people up so that the skilled worker shortages the list isn't as long as it is. That's good, but in the interim, what are you going to do? If you're going to halve the number of legal migrants, who's going to prop up the NHS? Who's going to do the jobs that aren't filled?
But the British businesses, who should be investing in the British public are not doing that. They're importing cheap labour from across the world, and Labour and the Conservatives are enabling them to do that. I agree with you. Invest in the British public. Who's supposed to do that? The people who are not choosing to do that.
I think the problem is you can't bring into international students. It's a completely different thing. If we just stick to the workers' shortages argument, then what is going to instantly happen if you remove migration?
All right.
No one's saying remove migration. Who said
if you halve the number tomorrow?
Let's let Freddie.
Life is about more than labour shortages. And the problem
Tell that to the NHS.
Human beings are not robots.
Let Freddie talk.
The difficult thing about importing, 700 however many thousand people a year, is that it's not just filling labour shortages. It means filling up school places. It means filling up hospitals. It means putting huge burden on British infrastructure that simply cannot cope.
But surely that's
when you're
poor
importing
planning.
That's not poor planning. They're allowed. Here's the thing.
It's
Under
one of the biggest
it's impossible.
construction work.
But hold on. Under the rules,
Which country in the world, short of possibly China, could build cities that could hold 750,000 people a year?
How have we got to a situation where we have these massive labour shortages, we're not training our own people and we're not expanding
because we keep importing more people. Because we keep importing more people instead of thinking ahead. That's the problem. We keep importing more people than thinking ahead. For every one of those skilled labourers that only make up 11% of the visas that have been handed out over the last 2 years, they bring in 1.4 dependents. So they're not a net gain. They're a net drain on the country. And you need to, look at the data and accept the facts.
But the thing is, I have looked at the data, and all the data suggests that the majority of migrants are net contributors.
Yeah, then you're looking at the wrong data, because this is the data from the government, from gov.uk.
And that they
you are looking,
the growth that we so sorely lack.
at myths. The data on gov.uk is very clear. The data you are citing is false.
OK, well, right, look, just as a very quick whip round, yes or no, do you trust anyone, from what you've heard so far, to control our borders?
Yes, but probably reform.
Probably reform, fine. OK, yourself?
I think sadly not, and I think actually beyond Britain it's a problem for almost all developed countries, and nobody seems to have very good solutions for it.
Do you trust anyone to sort out our borders?
No, because everyone's intent on demonising migrants and framing them as the cause of all our problems. So until we're honest...
Some might say making sure that we have enough homes for people who are already here to live in.
Who's going to build them?
British built, that would be a crying shame.
We have a shortage of construction workers.
OK, all right. Coming up, Nigel Farage vows not to back down after he was attacked again on the campaign trail. There should be a clip.
I will not surrender to the mob. I will not stop campaigning.
More on that later. But the Reform Party leader is taking on the pollsters too.
And I very much hope that the polling industry becomes honest. Otherwise, I'll have a fight with them.
Yeah, I want to drill down into whether or not the pollsters are suppressing the Reform vote. So I've got UK research manager for More in Common, Ed Hodgson, giving his expert analysis. But next, this is big, OK? It's big for everyone. It's big for all of us. Former Labour spokesman James Matthewson goes head-to-head with broadcaster Emma Webb on whether we should trust Labour or the Tories more with our money. OK, they've got some big policies that were out today. They were absolutely hammering each other over who could be trusted more with your hard-earned cash. So we are going to sort it out once and for all when I come back.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
How prevalent is it in those with darker skin, like me?
That's a great question, and it's one that we get a lot. So your skin tone does affect your risk of skin cancer. People at the most risk are people with lighter skin tones, so light-coloured hair and eyes as well, lots of moles and freckles, a history of sunburn or a family history of skin cancer. But people with darker skin tones can still burn and can still get skin cancer. Anybody can get skin cancer. So I would encourage everybody, regardless of your ethnicity or your skin tone, to think really seriously about taking care when it's sunny. That myth that you've mentioned that black people can't get skin cancer is really prevalent, and that's something I want to dispel right now, immediately, because more black people think maybe they can't get skin cancer. That might mean that when they spot something unusual for them, they're less likely to go to the doctor and they're diagnosed later. And when you're diagnosed later, your outcomes do tend to be worse.
So the figures are disturbing that more people are getting skin cancer. But what about outcomes? I mean, if you do get skin cancer, what are your prospects?
So, yeah, like you say, this research is a mixed picture. We're seeing incidence, so the number of new cases going up, which is not good news. But there is some good news in that mortality, so whether you're going to die or not, is actually going down. And we think that's partly due to early diagnosis, which I just mentioned is so important. But also research has led to better and kinder treatments, which mean the outcomes are likely to be better. So now, if you're diagnosed at the earliest stage, stage 1, with melanoma, Actually, around 9 in 10 people will survive their disease for 5 years or more.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but it's actually about you.
And we won't ever forget that. Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
Now, more than ever, it's important to hear
all sides as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting.
I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Coming up, are pollsters deliberately suppressing reform? And Nigel Farage. I'll speak to a top pollster shortly to get to the bottom of that. But first, who do you trust more with your money? It's kicked off today between Labour and the Tories. It's time now for the head-to-head. Yes, so the Conservatives launched their manifesto at Silverstone earlier today, and Rishi Sunak promised £17 billion in tax cuts.
We will keep cutting taxes in the coming years, meaning that by 2027 we will have halved national insurance to 6%. That is a tax cut, my friends, worth £1,300 to the average worker.
Well, Mr Sunak also promised bold tax cuts for the self-employed, enhanced pension protection and no new net zero charges. But Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves claimed the manifesto contained a whopping £71 billion of unfunded commitments and accused the Prime Minister of cosplaying Liz Truss.
Rishi Sunak said he was the antidote to Liz Truss. Instead, he's cosplaying Liz Truss by, again, doing what the Conservatives did in that mini-budget with, in this case, £71 billion of unfunded commitments. So they're not going to cut national insurance, or if they do, all it's going to mean is £4,800 more on your mortgage.
Well, then Sir Keir Starmer piped up, didn't he? Made this punchy, if not slightly rich jibe about Rishi Sunak's pitch to the nation.
Well, this is coming from the party that's put tax to the highest level since, for 70 years. And they're building this sort of Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto where anything you want can go in it. None of it is costed. It's a recipe for more of the same. And that's why this choice of turn our back on this, turn the page and rebuild with Labour is so important. We've got 6 first steps. We're ready to go on July the 5th.
I've got a feeling you might regret saying that. But Labour's plans have also been criticised because apparently they're uncosted, and their plans to raise cash through the ending of tax breaks for private schools and, of course, the non-dom tax loopholes have come under fire. Now, Rishi Sunak believes the election presents a clear choice.
Keir Starmer is asking for a blank cheque, and he will not tell people which taxes he is going to put up that are ultimately going to cost them £2,000. So if you want a secure...
Yeah. So tonight I am asking, who do you trust more with your money? Labour, the Tories, or neither? And I'm very keen to get your views on this. gbnews.com/your say. Tweet me at gbnews. While you're there, please go and vote in our poll. I'll give you the results shortly. Going head-to-head on this, former Labour spokesman James Mathewson and broadcaster Emma Webb. James, I'll start with you. As far as I can tell, some of the Labour funding at the moment needs to be for Great British Energy, funding for new teachers, more state school places, free breakfast in every primary school, renegotiate with medical unions, 2 million more NHS appointments every single year, the railways, increase the minimum wage to a genuine living wage, and that, I think, comes from non-doms who will leave and windfall taxes from companies that will scale back production. So does that add up?
I don't really care whether it adds up, Barry. The main thing is it's not coming from the British people. It's not coming because of the triple lock. That's the fantastic position Labour's put itself in. Whether you agree with it or not, they've backed themselves into a corner on it. And that's fantastic for the British people because they now are signed up to that idea that the British taxpayer does not have to pay more because the Tories have already put us in a position where we're paying more than we've ever paid before. So the idea is that, you know, under a Labour government, I'm pleased to hear this because we have this concern about Labour shifting to the right. The central purpose of a Labour Party created by the trade union movement, as it was to redistribute wealth in Britain. And this is along those lines.
Right. OK. I mean, it's nothing if not honest, I suppose. Emma, your response as to whether or not any of that makes sense and if the Tories will be better?
Well, unless I misunderstood there, that was typical socialism, forgetting whose money it is that you're spending. That money is the money of the British people if it's raised through taxes. But look, I think it was amusing to listen to Rachel Reeves talking about cosplaying when the Labour Party are trying to cosplay as fiscally responsible patriots. I am not saying that the Conservatives have done a great job. One of the reasons why we're in a sticky patch with the economy is because of lockdown, which was something that Keir Starmer cheered on, and I think everybody can relish the just delicious sense of humour around Keir Starmer saying that criticising Jeremy Corbyn, criticising the Labour Party by comparing it to an uncosted manifesto of Jeremy Corbyn's that he himself supported at the time. I knew leopards don't change their spots, and at least with the Conservative Party, you know, it's an aberration that the reason why they're being so criticised by other Conservatives and by the Conservative Party base is because they're being criticised on the grounds that they have not been properly Conservative. And actually, the reality is that I don't think Keir Starmer, if when he becomes Prime Minister, is going to be able to keep a lid on the friction with the left of the party, who are hardly going to be rallying for fiscal responsibility. So I think that we'll see when the Labour Party are in government that they'll be riven with divisions. But I don't trust them one bit. And even if I think that the Conservative Party have failed and nobody believes anything they say, even if they were promoting good policies in their manifesto, no one would believe them. But ultimately, you can't trust the Labour Party. You can't trust socialists to take care of your money for you.
All right, and I'm just going to introduce, I'll put this clip to you, James, because earlier on, you know, we had Keir Starmer there saying about how what the Tories are putting forward is a Jeremy Corbyn-style manifesto. All right, well, I mean, we have got the receipts, haven't we?
I had to get a train to meet the rest of the Shadow Cabinet and Jeremy Corbyn in Birmingham to launch our manifesto. And that's what this manifesto is about. Real change, ambitious change, and ambition to meet the needs. We should treat, if you like, the 2017 manifesto as our foundational document. The radicalism and the hope that inspired across the country was real.
Is he a complete charlatan?
I don't think he's a complete charlatan in the same way that no politician's a complete charlatan. However, he's a politician, isn't he? He's Keir Starmer. He's a politician, and he's standing to be Prime Minister of the country.
So he is lying.
He's playing a game. I don't believe that he's lying. I think what he's doing is very clever, because the optics of that little clip of British people hearing that tonight on the news when they hear Keir Starmer say it's a Jeremy Corbyn style, manifesto in that kind of, condescending way. What people hear is Keir Starmer is not Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, what they also hear is the time, like I've just played now, which is 2 clips of him backing that exact manifesto, which isn't particularly great, is it?
Patrick, you're giving too much credence to the time the British public have on their hands. Those of us who are in this, who are absorbed in this all the time, who are doing the analysis, fair enough, but people who hear that clip of Keir Starmer will think, he's not Jeremy Corbyn. And I withheld my vote from Labour about Jeremy Corbyn. What I hear, just to say quickly on Emma's point there, is Emma saying, the Tories are terrible, but I'm going to vote for them anyway. I mean, the lack of inspiration in that, I mean, when it comes to it, 14 years of what we've had Liz Truss. We're talking about there might be divisions in a Labour government. Look at the divisions that there are in the Tory government, as we sit here and look at them.
All right, James, all right. I'll try and come back to you if we've got time. But Emma, unless I've missed something here, and I'm willing to stand corrected on this, I haven't seen a huge amount of Jeremy Hunt. I haven't. Which, given that Rishi Sunak was making some really extraordinary claims about tax today, the implication for me would be that maybe the Tory Chancellor isn't on board with this. And I think that should possibly concern people.
Yeah, I think there are lots of reasons to be concerned. And actually, I take issue with what you've just said there, not you, Patrick, because I'm not saying, that you should vote for the Tories. In fact, I've been very critical of the Conservatives' campaign. I think trying to advertise your party by saying we're the least bad option is not a good strategy when campaigning in a general election. I've been very critical. That. Look, I'm not saying that the Conservatives have got it right. I've been very critical of them. I think they've made many, many mistakes. But I think ultimately a Labour government will be an absolute disaster. And I think we're already seeing that now. And they're not even in government.
A disaster. What more of a disaster do you get? We had Boris Johnson with Partygate. We had Liz Truss crash the economy. The Tories have destroyed this country. It is a disaster.
What were the finances like after the last Labour government, Jay? Just to clarify, you say what more of a disaster could we have? All right. What were the finances like? What was that little note after the last Labour government, just out of interest?
14 years ago, Patrick, we're talking about a long time ago. The Labour Party has changed.
It was the last time, wasn't it? It was the last time.
It's changed 6 times ideologically in that time.
Okay. All right. We are being asked to believe quite a lot. I mean, you are. One thing I will agree with you on, absolutely, is that we are also being asked to believe quite a lot from the Tories here, which we've precious little evidence to back it up. I suppose, Emma, there is the Labour line that we've got. What's it? £71 billion of unfunded, uncosted things here with the Tories, plus the highest tax burden since World War II. So, when you look at what the Tories want to do, does that add up? Or are we looking at Keir Starmer and thinking, well, as James will probably say, I mean, how much worse could it be?
Look, ultimately, I don't think it matters because I think, as Alison Pearson has said, the Conservatives could promise you the world, they could promise you all sorts of treats, but ultimately no one's going to believe them because they failed on so many of their promises. Yes, they did succeed in lowering inflation, but there are all sorts of other points that they have failed on. But I think ultimately that's beside the point. And, it's also comical and we can laugh about it now. But we shall see when the Labour Party release their manifesto on Thursday and when we perhaps inevitably have a Labour government, we shall see what sorts of troubles unfold, because I really do think it's going to be an absolute car crash. And if you think it's been bad under the Conservatives, it'll be worse under Labour. But that's not me saying that's an argument to vote for the Conservatives.
All right. Well, look, both of you, thank you very much. It's lovely stuff, that. Very much two sides of the coin there. So it's former Labour spokesperson James Matthewson and broadcaster Emma Webb. Right. Well, I did show you previously, of course, the clip of Keir Starmer backing Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto, despite today criticising the Conservatives for launching one that he says is exactly the same as that. But yes, Keir Starmer has accused the Conservatives of launching a Corbyn-style manifesto. Who do you trust more with your money? David, on your say, says, I'm a Tory and I've still got my morals in mind. The Tories are our only hope. All right, David. Janice says, Starmer's leading in the polls, so that's clearly where the majority of bits want to put their trust. Yeah, fair enough, Janice, I suppose. Derek says, I would pick Reform before choosing either the Tories or Labour. I think their manifesto's out on Monday, I think. Your verdict is in. 6% of you say you would trust Labour more with your money. 22% say you would trust the Tories. And 72% of you say neither. So there we go. Coming up, now, Ed Davey, I think this is big, this. Ed Davey has announced that the Lib Dems will look to reunite us with the EU. Is reversing Brexit really a good look for his party in the blue wall? There's much more to it as well. Europe's lurched to the right, doesn't it? And on top of that, does he really want to reopen that can of worms? Former senior advisor to the Lib Dems, Pablo O'Hanna, defends their controversial manifesto pledge shortly. But first, after winning his battle against the banks, Nigel Farage claims that he's coming for Britain's polling companies.
And I very much hope that the polling industry becomes honest. Otherwise, I'll have a fight with them.
Well, stay tuned, because I want to get to the bottom of this. Are polling companies actually suppressing the Reform vote?
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. There will be fewer showers during the next 24 hours, with an increased chance of clear spells, particularly in the west as higher pressure moves in. But we keep the northerly airflow, so we keep that cool air with us. And as a result, where we do see clearing skies overnight, it is going to turn fairly chilly. The clearest skies are across central and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, western England and Wales, although still the possibility of a shower or two running into West Wales and Cornwall. There'll also be some showers into the northeast of Scotland, eastern England, where there'll be more cloud, 10 Celsius here, but where we've got the clear skies further west, the potential for the mid-single figures by dawn. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful start to the day for much of central Scotland through the Highlands, Grampians, Western Isles as well. We've got this cloud cover into the Northern Isles and the far northeast of the mainland, giving a few light showers in places. Northern Ireland, though, mostly bright and dry first thing. Likewise for Northern England. Thicker cloud there for the east of England. Into the southeast, 1 or 2 showers about first thing, likewise for West Wales and Cornwall. But these are the exceptions, I think, for the vast majority. Blue skies and patchy cloud around first thing, but mostly dry. Now, as temperatures rise through the morning, there's always the possibility of the odd shower breaking out once again across eastern England. But for many, it's a fine and bright day. Still on the cool side, but the winds won't be quite as brisk. So I think it's going to feel a bit more pleasant. Temperatures of 18 Celsius, perhaps 19 in the south, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Another chilly start to the day on Thursday. Plenty of fine weather first thing, but in the west we've got the cloud building, the wind picks up, outbreaks of rain push into Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales by lunchtime, and in the east it turns cloudy by the afternoon as well. That rain clears to showers on Friday and into Saturday.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Still to come, is Ed Davey right to pledge to bring the UK back to the single market? I especially didn't like the fact that he thinks we have to go cap in hand. Former senior advisor to the Lib Dems, Pablo Ohana, weighs in on what I suspect might be an electoral disaster for them. But first, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has launched a scathing fight back against polling companies that he feels are suppressing his party. After Farage claimed that various polling groups didn't prompt for reform in their research during an interview with Laura Koonsberg, opinion executive Callum Weir, it's a polling company, hit back claiming that this was categorically not true. So then Nigel Farage responded, "Hi Callum, you have just admitted to the world that you prompt Reform UK under the other section, which means that you suppress the vote in your polling. Do you really want a fight over this?" And then he doubled down in a press conference yesterday.
I have written to Professor Green, the head of the British Polling Council, and I very much hope that the polling industry becomes honest. Otherwise, I'll have a fight with them. Like I had a fight with the banks last year. I can't wait. It's up to them. It really, really is.
Just for clarity, that is not Professor Green the rapper. But on Sunday, Farage wrote to the British Polling Council to demand that they ensure greater transparency. His demands were met just 24 hours later. So the Polling Council confirmed that they had, quote, written to all our members, reminding them of the importance of making their question, wording, prompt and sequence clear. So, look, are polling companies, and have they been, suppressing or hiding support for reform. Well, I welcome to the fray now UK Research Manager for More in Common, which is a polling company, Ed Hodgson. Ed, look, thank you very much. Can you explain what's going on here? Because, you know, look, you've got the traditional parties, haven't you? You've got Labour, you've got the Tories, you've got the Lib Dems, and I can completely understand that you would obviously have them, you know, in light when it comes to who you're going to vote for. But Reform are polling, depending on what you look at, around 15%, maybe even a bit higher in some of them. Should they not be in that same bracket as well? You shouldn't have to go looking for them, should you?
Yeah, I think it's worth saying there are a range of views here with different pollsters. So many pollsters, including More in Common, the polling agency I work for, do include Reform UK in that main list of parties. We choose not to include other lists. So Workers' Party, for example, comes behind the other option, simply because they're not polling high enough nationally to be included in that list. But pollsters set different thresholds, and there are good reasons for that. So Opinion, who we saw earlier in that tweet, don't put Reform UK in that initial list of parties. One reason for that is because with smaller parties, most people don't vote for smaller parties. So if you're a pollster, you want to make sure that if people say they're going to vote for a smaller party, they actually mean it and they're actually looking out for it. Because otherwise you might end up with people who, for example, might not have heard of Reform UK before and just like the word reform when they see it in a poll option.
I think, though, so when you look at some of the other parties that Reform were lumped in with, you've got some kind of obscure trade union parties that, you know, apart from the people who may be in that party, people have never heard of. And I do wonder whether or not that is skewing the amount of people who might go and say that they're going to vote for Reform, though. I mean, is that not a mistake on the polling company's part?
I don't think it's likely to be having a massive impact, if I'm honest. So last week, we actually, as it happens, had a poll out at the same time as Opinion. We have Reform in our full initial list. Opinion puts it in the second list. Opinion had Reform vote 1 point higher than us. So even if you are putting Reform behind sort of a barrier, it seems that the Reform voters know to click through and select it anyway.
I suppose one of the things it comes down to, really, Ed, is whether or not you think there might be a left-wing bias in the polling industry. Do you think there might be?
I don't think it makes sense to think that pollsters sort of have a view on which party they want to win, sort of professionally speaking. Actually, if you're a pollster, you get one chance every 5 years to prove how good you are at predicting elections, and you don't want to be wrong. So you want to be as right as possible. There's no sort of skin in the game for underestimating a party if you're going to be wrong on it.
OK. Is there any evidence at all to suggest that if you have someone who's not in those main kind of brackets of the traditional parties or something like that, and you have to go looking for them, that actually people don't go looking for them? I mean, is there actually any evidence whatsoever to suggest that, you know, hiding Reform somewhere along with the monster raving Looney Party and whoever else would actually have an impact on whether or not people say that they're going to vote for them?
As I say, it doesn't look from the polling we've seen, just comparing pollsters that do prompt for Reform initially and those that don't. There's a massive difference. There have been polling errors in the past on this sort of thing. So historically, by putting UKIP, for example, in that initial list of options, too many people have said that they'll vote for UKIP and actually end up voting for them in a general election. Similarly, in these local elections recently, some of the mayoral election misses were from not having independent candidates named in the first list of options, and actually lots of people voting for some of these independent candidates.
Because I do wonder whether or not some of the pollsters, well, not hiding Reform, but you get what I mean, putting them in the other box there, actually fundamentally misjudge the mood of the nation. Whether they misjudge the fact that most people now, I think, do know who Reform are and what they're about, and whether that actually was maybe some pollsters maybe being a bit out of touch.
It's tricky to say. I would say pollsters, sort of by definition, are more in touch with the mood of the nation than many people, given they're speaking to thousands of people every single week. When it comes to Reform specifically, if anything, the polls are being too generous to Reform at the moment. If we compare Reform's recent performances in by-elections and local elections, they've actually done quite a lot worse than they have been doing in the polling. So I think pollsters generally are actually more worried that their Reform vote share is too high.
Well, it's interesting, and because another way of looking at it for Nigel Farage might be, actually, it's better for the polls to have you a bit low, and then maybe after the election, if you are lucky, you can say you've outperformed the polls, can't you? As opposed to everyone predicting before the election that 20% of the public are going to vote for you, and then it may be coming in slightly less. But look, thank you very much for clearing some of that up anyway, and Nigel Farage is obviously willing to take this fight to, I think, whoever wants it in any pub car park that will have it. So thank you very, very much. That is the research manager for More in Common, Ed Hodgson. In a statement provided to GB News, Savanta, the polling company, has said that we are an independent and well-established polling company that purely seeks to accurately measure public opinion, not promote or suppress one party over another, and any implication otherwise is entirely false. We are confident in our figures as they stand. We won't be bullied into making methodological changes by politicians simply because they don't like our results. They continue. We were the most accurate polling company for the latest London and West Midlands mayoral elections, with an average error across both of 0 percentage points when it came to Reform UK's performance. Unsurprisingly, polling company Opinion have also been onto us. They said every methodological, easy for me to say, decision Opinion makes is designed to ensure the headline voting intention numbers are an accurate estimates of public opinion at the time of the poll. This has been demonstrated in Opinion's strong track record in elections, which includes their final poll of the 2019 general election, which was the most accurate of that campaign. All information about how Opinion conducts its polls and the methodological rationale behind them is publicly available, and you can find it on their website. Nigel's up for the fight on this. I think that possibly just picking a fight with somebody is quite a good way to go about getting more votes, whether or not it is justified. Do you think that there might be a left-wing bias when it comes to polling companies? But coming up, do you remember this?
Got a knife, doesn't it? Yeah, hello, please.
I certainly do, and I will reveal to you very shortly the pathetic sentence handed down to a deranged knife attacker that targeted London's Jewish community. But next, Ed Davies promised that the Lib Dems will get back into bed with the European Union. Is rejoining the single market that Brits voted to leave really an election-winning strategy? I look forward to talking to former senior advisor to the Liberal Democrats, Pablo Ohana, and that's going to happen very, very soon.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
I've got a grade 3 astrocytoma brain tumour. Once I was diagnosed, I tried to do my claim with my insurance company and was rejected. They then also cancelled my life insurance and also cancelled my wife's policies as well.
And this is Zurich Insurance, John.
This is Zurich,
and their point was, because you'd had some dizzy spells, which you hadn't told them about, they say dizzy spells equates to a brain tumour, which there's no evidence to support that.
I was with King's College Hospital. They ignored them. King's College Hospital were the experts.
And you were expecting £25,000?
Yeah, that was a critical illness claim.
Critical illness, because you've got a critical illness. Clearly, it couldn't be more critical, could it?
No.
Michelle, you've got a lovely poorly husband, and you're also worrying about paying the bills and what the future holds.
Yeah.
What impact is this having on you on a day-to-day basis?
I try not to think too much about the future because it does upset me. I'm kind of thinking, when John does go, I'm left with a mortgage to pay and 2 young children.
How old are your kids?
5 and 3.
Right.
Yeah. So it's incredibly tough.
And are you working?
I haven't worked since having the children.
Right.
And that's a decision we made when we had children.
In the grand scheme of things, this amount of money is a drop in the ocean for a company like Zurich.
Yeah, because I think they could make all this go away.
I've read some of the statement. Zurich said, "We're sorry to hear of the very difficult circumstances Mr. Rendler's family are experiencing." You're terminally ill, and they're calling that difficult circumstances.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians in the media, but actually, it's about you.
And we won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear
all sides
as you make your decision ahead of polling day.
We're here for you.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, the Lib Dems unveiled their election manifesto yesterday, and their leader, Sir Ed Davey, has promised a 4-stage roadmap to Britain strengthening its ties with the EU.
We believe in the long term, we need to be back at the heart of Europe. But we're being really clear that we're not going to pretend that's going to be easy. Regrettably, the Conservative Party have so poisoned Britain's relationship with our nearest neighbours, our allies. They've undermined trust. And when I speak to European politicians, regrettably, they don't trust the United Kingdom anymore. And how sad is that?
I wonder how many European politicians he's speaking to, because the EU election saw a support for right-wing parties in France, Germany, Italy, Spain and Poland. I am delighted to welcome former senior advisor to the Lib Dems, Pablo Ohana. Pablo, look, thank you very much for joining us here. Do the Lib Dems really want to rejoin the EU? It's just lurched to the right. Britain looks like it's about to go socialist, so I dare say that maybe you should be happy for Brexit.
I think there was a rise in some right-wing parties, but generally 75% of people voted for solidly pro-European parties in that election. People have a vote; they're entitled to it, and the debate is there to be had. I think it's important that we have robust debate between left and right and the centre, and sometimes left wins, sometimes right wins, sometimes the middle wins, and that's democracy.
I just wonder about Ed Davey's attitude to it. I mean, he obviously sees us as going back to the EU with our tail between our legs, saying we're very sorry and being subservient to them. It's a terrible start to negotiations, that, isn't it?
Well, it's not how I see it. I think, in a democracy, you have milestones. When working class people get the vote, when women could stand for election, when the voting age was reduced to 18. Democracy is not a one-way destination. We can't just say we're a democratic society and there's no more work to be done. We're always going to be arriving at that democratic destination, always evolving, growing, challenging it.
Yeah, but he just say, Pablo, sorry to interrupt, but, he just say, look, they're all really upset with us and they might not trust us. So they might not even want to have us back, is the implication. Now, can I just say, why would we want to go back? I mean, according to Reuters, in May, I've got a headline here, UK exits recession with fastest growth in nearly 3 years. Germany fares worse. And then from February this year, there's an article, Eurozone has seen its economy practically motionless in the last year as it continues to stagnate. We are obviously better than Spain, Portugal, Hungary, Lithuania, Slovakia, as well as a whole host of other EU nations. Why would we want to go back to the single market?
The government's own figures, the ONS, is saying that it is costing us £1 million per hour. And we're here in an election campaign where the Tories are claiming Labour policies will cost £38 billion, Labour are claiming Tory policies will cost £71 billion. But independent economists and impartial analysts have concluded that Brexit is costing us £100 billion every single year. How can
and yet our economy is growing faster than most of the European nations.
Sorry, say again?
And yet our economy appears to be growing much faster than most of the European nations. The Eurozone has been practically stagnant. We exited recession with the fastest growth in nearly 3 years, better than Germany.
But we can't repair our economy. We can't invest in public services and deliver jobs without doing something about that 100 billion black hole. That is just, it's sitting there. And so I think it is a logical solution for the Liberal Democrats to say, yes, we're going to have a practical relationship with the European Union. We're going to rebuild those relationships. We're going to go back into the single market so that we can have that relationship, which is
would it
crucial
mean, would the single market, rejoining it, mean that we would have to take all of the rules whilst having none of the decision-making?
But we already do. Because if we want to sell into the European single market, we have to take their rules. So we are already rule takers. We used to be part of that conversation. We used to be part of that debate, and and all the rest of it. We had the referendum. Now we're not. But we can't sell into the European market on our own terms.
But just to clarify, the Lib Dems are looking to win a load of Tory Brexit backing seats in the south, and their pitch for that is let's rejoin the single market without having any decision making. That seems to be odd.
Well, 65% of Conservative voters back joining the single market. So, I mean, I think the Lib Dem strategy at the moment is, as you say, to win those sort of Tory blue wall kind of seats, and they are doing that, and the polls are reflecting that, and I think they're going to have a good night, and I'm looking forward to the election. But they're a realistic and honest party, and they're saying, listen, we have this problem that we need to fix. This is our solution to that. I think it's practical.
All right, Pablo, thank you very, very much. Great to chat to you. I hope to talk to you again. Pablo Ohana, their former senior advisor to the Lib Dems. Coming up, with nearly 2/3 of British Muslims still backing Labour in the latest polling. Despite all that controversy, are they having any cut-through? I'm also going to be revealing these shocking details of a pathetic sentence handed down to a man who tried to stab Jews. Stay tuned.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. There will be fewer showers during the next 24 hours, with an increased chance of clear spells, particularly in the west as higher pressure moves in. But we keep the northerly airflow, so we keep that cool air with us. And as a result, where we do see clearing skies overnight, it is going to turn fairly chilly. The clearest skies will be across central and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales, although still the possibility of a shower or two running into West Wales and Cornwall. There'll also be some showers into the northeast of Scotland, Eastern England, where there'll be more cloud, 10 Celsius here, but where we've got the clear skies further west, the potential for the mid-single figures by dawn. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful start to the day for much of central Scotland through the Highlands, Grampians, Western Isles as well. We've got this cloud cover into the Northern Isles and the far northeast of the mainland, giving a few light showers in places. Northern Ireland, though, mostly bright and dry first thing. Likewise for Northern England. Thicker cloud there for the east of England. Into the southeast, 1 or 2 showers about first thing, likewise for West Wales and Cornwall. But these are the exceptions, I think, for the vast majority. Blue skies and patchy cloud around first thing, but mostly dry. Now, as temperatures rise through the morning, there's always the possibility of the odd shower breaking out once again across eastern England. But for many, it's a fine and bright day. Still on the cool side, but the winds won't be quite as brisk. So I think it's going to feel a bit more pleasant. Temperatures of 18 Celsius, perhaps 19 in the south, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Another chilly start to the day on Thursday. Plenty of fine weather first thing, but in the west we've got the cloud building, the wind picks up, outbreaks of rain push into Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales by lunchtime, and in the east it turns cloudy by the afternoon as well. That rain clears to showers on Friday and into Saturday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're making this summer funner, with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. Tonight.
He's got a knife. Doesn't it? Yeah, hello, please.
You will not believe how the courts dealt with the crazed knifeman who wanted to stab Jews in broad daylight. Plus. Nigel Farage is attacked by the #BeKind brigade again.
The Muslim Vote is an initiative set up by organisations and individuals here in the UK to try and unite the Muslim community's electoral response.
New polls show the Muslim vote may have collapsed. Good news for Labour? Sorry, President Biden is away with the fairies again. And animal rights protesters target the king. Have there been any arrests, though? Plus. I've got some terrible news for vegans. On my panel tonight, it's columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. We've got The Spectator's Freddie Gray and author Amy Nicole-Turner. And can you spot what's wrong with this? Keep it on the screen if we can. If you're listening on radio, it is a man in some kind of kilt dress thing. But there's more to... Oh, there's another one. There we go. That's quite enough of that. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. What sentence would you give a knife-wielding lunatic who attacked Jews at random? Next.
The top story from the GB newsroom tonight, Rishi Sunak launched the Conservative election manifesto today, saying he understood that the electorate was frustrated with the Conservatives. The Prime Minister promised a multi-billion-pound package of tax cuts, including a reduction in national insurance. The pledges amount to a total of more than £17 billion in cuts by 2030. There's also help for first-time buyers, with changes to stamp duty and a pledge for a new Help to Buy scheme. There was also a promise to address the housing shortage by building 1.6 million new homes. £8.3 billion has also been set aside to fix potholes and resurface roads. And there'd also be a total ban on smartphones in schools, and on immigration. There's a promise to get flights off the ground to Rwanda every month, with Rishi Sunak saying the deterrent would be a key part of Britain's migration plan, clearing the asylum backlog within 6 months.
That is why if you vote Conservative on July the 4th, the flights removing illegal migrants will depart in July, establishing the deterrent that will stop the boats. Because when people know that if they try to come here illegally, they won't get to stay, then they will stop coming. And if we are forced to choose between our security and the jurisdiction of a foreign court, including the ECHR, we will always choose our nation's security.
Rishi Sunak. Well, Labour has also pledged to fix 1 million potholes every year if they're elected on July the 4th. The party says it'll turn the tide on the neglect of the UK's roads. Last year, pothole damage cost drivers almost £500 million, with the average damage worth £250 per car. That's according to Labour's figures. The Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay accused the Conservative government of failing drivers. She says the Tories have left Britain's roads plagued with potholes and have sat back as car insurance costs have spiralled out of control. Now, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, has condemned the attack on Nigel Farage after objects were thrown at him during a campaign event today. Police have arrested a 28-year-old man on suspicion of public order offences. It's understood a cup and possibly a stone narrowly missed the Reform UK leader who was on top of his party's battle bus in Barnsley town centre in Yorkshire. Mr Farage had been addressing supporters when he was heckled by demonstrators. He said he'd been warned by police not to get off the bus. And finally, the convicted sex offender and former pop star Gary Glitter has been ordered to pay more than £500,000 in damages to one of the women he abused. The woman, who can't be named, is suing the disgraced star, whose real name is Paul Gadd, following his conviction in 2015 for abusing her and 2 other young people between 1975 and 1980. He was briefly released in February last year before being sent back to prison after attempting to access images of children on the dark web after his release. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. I have an important GB News exclusive to bring to you. No other media outlet appears to have wanted to report this, so you can make of that what you will, but you may remember this terrifying incident.
Got a knife, doesn't it? Yeah, hello, please. Yeah, Kate, look, somebody got a knife by our shop. He's got a knife?
Well, that shocking attack was perpetrated by a man called Gabriel Abdullah, who attempted to go on a knife rampage at a kosher supermarket in Golders Green in London, one of the most densely populated Jewish areas in Britain. He was arrested. The first shock is what he was actually charged with. So apparently it was affray and being in possession of an article with a blade or a point. So not attempted murder or a hate crime. The day after this attack, GB News spoke to the brave man who managed to stop this crazed knifeman. Now that the whole court proceedings have concluded, I can play his testimony to you.
Just came straight out the till. He started arguing straight away, asking about Israel-Palestine, and obviously we don't talk about it here. Yeah. He was standing right over there between the pallets. He was asking me, well, what does your religion say about the state? But he asked me like 4 or 5 times the same question over and over. My father told me that a few shoppers were a bit concerned that I might have a knife on him or something. Okay. So my father came out also to check his pockets if he had anything, but he didn't because it was in back of his trousers. He told my father to go away. You're not a real Jew. You don't know what you're talking about. He lunged at my neck with his left hand. So I quickly took his hand off me, obviously. And then I tried to pin him down on the floor. But meanwhile, there was someone shouting that he has a knife. And my father also was realizing that he had the knife, was trying to pull him away from me. So even while I was still trying to fight him down, he had the knife on him out and didn't even realize that till much later. I decided to take the trolley to put the distance between him and me. The last resort, I pushed the trolley quickly into him. And then I ran back and he'd continued chasing after me. So meanwhile, my father came in. He also had the trolley to protect him, and then a few workers with brooms and scooters. Yeah, so he got a bit scared. He walked back slowly, and he made his way to the house. So meanwhile, we called the police, obviously, and the Shomrim. So thankfully, the police caught up with him, pinned him down.
I mean, we can all see that, right? We can all see it with our own eyes, and we've got the testimony of the chap there who's saying, yeah, the guy was wielding a knife, shouting about Palestine, and tried to stab him in the neck, OK? Here is how the ordeal made him feel.
Basically, straight away, I was very shaken. I was, like, in a different world, because it's something that's unexpected, and it's a very surprising event. Never witnessed anything like that.
But here is the kicker for you, all right? So Gabriel Abdullah pleaded guilty to those 2 relatively minor offences, and we can now reveal what he was sentenced to. 18 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. 12 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years to run concurrently, a 9-month alcohol treatment requirement, 30-day rehabilitation activity requirement. So, the punishment for a man who took a knife to a kosher supermarket and attempted to stab Jews while shouting about Palestine is no prison time. In fact, he gets a free trip to a rehab clinic by the looks of things as well. I have a statement here from Joseph Reitman, who is the individual that you heard from there, the very brave chap, actually, who potentially saved quite a few lives by reacting outside that kosher supermarket. He gave me this statement a bit earlier today. He said, look, when I first heard about the suspended sentence, I was utterly surprised. The fact he is basically out and about after attacking and threatening a bunch of people is crazy. Obviously, I will ask for an appeal, because this is way too light a sentence. I ask you now, no prison time for a man who wanted to take a knife to any Jew they could find. Is that really justice? Let's get our thoughts on my panel this evening. I've got columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow. I'm also joined by the deputy editor at The Spectator, it's Freddie Gray. And I've got author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Esther, I'll start with you on this. That, to me, just seems like an absolute joke of a sentence, really.
Well, it's a suspended sentence, so I'm assuming the overcrowding in prisons has something to do with the fact. But he will go to prison. I don't understand why this person has not been sort of fast-tracked as to one of the more dangerous people in society. He's either extremely mentally unwell or extremely heinous. I suspect he probably leans more towards the mentally unwell. But either way, he's a danger to society, and I don't think anyone would feel comfortable that someone like this is out and about on the streets. Like, I think that makes me very uncomfortable.
Well, Freddie, what message does this send? You know, you've got a guy there who has taken a knife, tried to stab a load of people at random because they're Jewish, in the neck and other places. And the message there is if you do that and you claim addiction or whatever, you're just going to be back out on the streets.
Well, let me start by closing this slightly. Unless we know the full details of the trial, which we don't, we shouldn't speak too specifically about it. But I'll tell you what it looks like, and it looks like exactly what you're suggesting there, which is a pretty soft letting off for someone who's done something quite obviously very heinous. And that is certainly what it looks like. But again, without having read the court reporting, because I don't think there is.
I mean, we can see it there, Freddie. Look at that.
Sure, we can.
That's what we're seeing. I mean, what possible mitigation?
I think the alcohol rehabilitation would suggest that he was inebriated or under the influence of alcohol when he committed this, or he has a problem with alcohol which could aggravate.
But it's not, unfortunately.
I don't think that's an excuse.
That's not, well, legally,
it's not an excuse, but that buttresses the point. That supports the point that this person, if he has a problem with alcohol and it could lead him to do these sorts of things, shouldn't be out in the street. That's the point I'm making.
Probably, if that's the case, then he needs more. There's more justification for rehabilitation rather than prison.
Yeah, but in a secure facility.
Do you think it's right that
no,
that man has got no prison time?
I don't at all. But I think the reason it was so lenient is because at the moment judges are very limited for options because there's literally no space in prisons. I was having a look at some of the other cases that have gone without prison time currently, and there was an example of somebody pouring boiling water over their prison officer. They got a sentence and they're not serving it because there's no space. There's been examples of prisoners staying in prison vans because there's so few spaces in prisons. So I think until we can get rid of that problem and make space in prisons, people like this are still going to remain out on the streets.
And also trying to section him under the Mental Health Act is also difficult because there are no spaces there either. I would actually think this person would obviously serve a prison sentence, but he still should be sectioned just under.
But it's also what he was charged with. I mean,
that's not an option either.
The other thing is what he was charged with. A fray and basically possession of a knife. What do you have to do to get charged with attempted murder?
Well, good question. I mean, the argument of the defence was that he made no forward stabbing motions with his hand.
Yeah.
But that's pretty tenuous, I would say.
And I think if he was determined to murder, if you're going to... I know, again, we don't know the details of the case. He would have bypassed the trolleys that were being pushed at him and tried to be more determined to actually stab these people. Although, yes, it doesn't look very good.
I do think the concern for a lot of Jewish people in London will be about two-tiered justice on this, because... we have seen with the policing, certainly in the last year, that when it comes to Jewish people being attacked and persecuted, authorities are slower to act and slower to prosecute than they are when other minority groups are targeted. I think that is...
I don't know, though, because, hate crime statistics have gone up across the board, particularly against
Well, that, by the way, was not classed as a hate crime, which is remarkable, isn't it? Well, so that, again, it's a good point that you make, but that was not a hate... What I think many people will regard as being arguably the most obvious example of a hate crime that I can think of.
The affray charge he was charged with was a racially aggravated affray, which you could argue is a step down from a hate crime. So yes, again, it's very curious.
I find it utterly remarkable. I do worry, Amy, about the message this sends to people in incredibly heightened times at the moment, very tense times, that you can see someone... I mean, trying to put myself in the position of those people at that kosher supermarket, what protection do they feel they've got?
I just think this speaks to the joke that has become the Tory party of law and order, and the fact that Rishi Sunak can say criminals will face no mercy on his social media when things like this are happening, and the court backlog is...
What if he did this... I can't argue with that, but don't expect it to get any better under a Labour government.
We would hope, because Keir Starmer is barrister. But what would happen if this guy did that outside of a synagogue or a Jewish school? That's what terrifies me. At least these men could have defended themselves. But imagine if he tried to target a more vulnerable community within the Jewish community.
I would argue now that the precedent that this sets is that if you take a knife to indiscriminately to a group of Jewish individuals and mercifully don't quite make contact with them, and then turn up at court and say you've got a drink problem, that you will probably go free.
It's just happening across the board, though, isn't it, with all crimes? We're in a situation where 95% of crimes go unsolved in our society. That's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I find that remarkable. I find that utterly remarkable. Look, we reached out to the Met Police, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Ministry of Justice, but they all refuse to comment on individual sentences. So, cheers, guys. Thank you. Coming up, is veganism a dangerous fad? I've got hold of a study that suggests that it might actually be bad for you to be a vegan. Plus, Farage is attacked again. I will bring you his typically punchy response shortly. It's only just landed, and you don't want to miss it. Plus, I will bring you Joe Biden's latest inspiring message for the American people.
She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
Yeah, no, spot on. But next, as a bombshell poll finds that 2/3 of British Muslims plan to vote Labour, has the Muslim Vote campaign failed? I'm going to be chatting to the editor of the British Muslim news site 5 Pillars, Roshan Mohammed Saleh, and that's next. Stay tuned.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan Tonight, weekends from 9 p.m.
England's new patron saint, Gary Lineker, a man holier and more virtuous than Mother Teresa and Gandhi combined, strikes again. Never one to miss the chance of some moral posturing, goal-hanging PR opportunist Lineker has spoken out about tonight's Champions League final. He tweeted the following: "This is the first time I'll be cheering for Real Madrid in a Champions League final." The German side Dortmund have signed a 3-year sponsorship deal with weapons manufacturer Rheinmetall. Now, Gary Lineker is not a stupid person. Following a stellar career on the pitch, it was a storied transition to broadcasting. And let me tell you, he's worth every penny of that £1.3 million a year of licence fee payers' cash to introduce football clips. So how did it escape the attention of this bright man that our democracies and our freedoms are protected and defended by the weapons produced like companies such as Rheinmetall? In fact, we should big up, not cancel, Rheinmetall, who have produced some of the armaments which are now helping Ukraine. Well, I'm very confused because I thought Gary Lineker was very supportive of Ukraine and their battle for survival. But now he wants to take their weapons away. I'm very, very confused. After all, they're going to need weapons with which to defend themselves. They can't fight by sending off tweets like Gary does. Now, many people love Gary Lineker. He has over 8 million followers on Twitter. This idol of the progressive left battled HMRC in court to reduce his tax bill by almost £5 million. This latest Lineker rant about war is weapons-grade nonsense. Sorry, Gary, but you're firing blanks.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys Tonight. Still to come, tonight's panel and I will bring to you the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. But before that, a new poll has shown that almost 2/3 of British Muslims could still back Labour at the general election. This is despite recent opposition on the party's stance on Gaza, the Israel-Hamas conflict. So it's interesting results, this. So Savanta found that 63% of British Muslim voters would vote Labour if an election was held tomorrow. Just 12% are offering support for the Conservative Party. However, if we do delve slightly deeper, the results become a bit more intriguing. So 44% of those polled said that the Gaza conflict was amongst their top 5 election issues, with a whopping 86% indicating they'd consider backing an independent leading their campaign on the topic of Gaza. So it does beg the question, doesn't it? Do we really want independent candidates like some of these chaps from the recent local elections strolling around the corridors of Westminster?
We are coming for you in the general election.
This is not my victory. This is Palestine innocent people victory.
Stand for humanity. Stand for Palestine. Stand for George Galloway.
Well, I'm welcoming now the editor of the British Muslim news organisation 5 Pillars. It's Roshan Mohammed Saleh. Roshan, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Look, really interesting this. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've gone on record numerous times and said I had expected this Muslim vote thing to really have a massive impact, actually, at this election. If I just look at those latest polls there, I mean, it would show, apparently, that it's not really having much of a dent. Do you think it's collapsed, the Muslim vote?
No, I mean, it remains to be seen. Ultimately, July the 4th is the day of truth, and we'll find out. I'm not totally convinced by this poll. I would have estimated that about 50% of Muslims would have voted Labour, or will vote Labour, simply because the ties are very deep, and the umbilical cord to Labour, it'll take perhaps over a decade to be cut completely. I think that the poll probably was a nationwide snapshot of Muslims, whereas the Muslim vote campaign is concentrated in certain areas of the country where there are dense Muslim populations, like, West Yorkshire, Birmingham, certain parts of London, Greater Manchester. And that's where the campaign to punish the Tories and especially Labour is focused, whereas this poll, I think, was a nationwide. I think we shouldn't get carried away about the Muslim vote. I've been covering the Muslim vote for 20 years, and I personally think it's been over-egged, apart from a few victories for George Galloway here and there. But I've seen a level of organisation that I haven't seen before in my 25 years of covering Muslim affairs. A level of, even money and organisation, self-organisation on the ground. We have the Galloway factor. We have the Muslim vote organisation. So I do think that we are going to see perhaps a couple of MPs being returned to Parliament on the back of the Muslim vote. I think the Muslim vote will be talked about. It'll be noticed. They'll send a clear message to the Tories and to Labour especially that any pro-Israel candidates will be targeted at the ballot box. But I think that's it. But in terms of, stopping Keir Starmer from becoming Prime Minister or all those grandiose talking points, no, that's not going to happen.
I did wonder when I saw that poll there, the Labour Party, one thing it's been accused of is taking the Muslim vote for granted. over the years, and that now potentially backfiring, right? And then I actually thought, well, I saw that poll, and I wondered if, ironically, the muslimvote.co.uk might have been taking the Muslim vote for granted a bit. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure how serious the poll is. It's about 1,000 people. It's not a massive snapshot, is it, Patrick? So I personally am a bit surprised by the results, but not overly surprised, because especially older generations of Muslims, old habits die hard. Then maybe not living in the activist bubble that I live in necessarily. They're not online so much. Perhaps they haven't been so affected by the online narrative and discourse surrounding Gaza. So I think it's quite possible that older generations of Muslims will unfortunately stick with Labour. But the trajectory is clear. Younger Muslims, and when I say younger, I mean people probably under 50, under 45, 50. They are leaving Labour, they're deserting Labour, they feel they've been taken for granted, their votes have been taken for granted, they've not been listened to, especially on foreign policy issues.
Can I ask you about that? Sorry,
the future looks very bleak for Labour.
I think, because I think that's a really important point, the generational aspect of this, actually. Some people might view that as a bit of a concern, the idea that maybe the younger generation of the British Muslim community could be perceived, I suppose, by maybe the lay observer as possibly being a bit more radical in some of their views, and the older generation, perhaps a sign there that maybe integration hasn't necessarily worked. Would that be fair or not?
I think it's fair to say that the younger generation of Muslims are perhaps more religious in many ways, or more tuned with the religious values. It's quite strange, because usually the trajectory is the opposite. When immigrant communities come into any society, usually they assimilate. Muslims haven't assimilated like other communities, because they believe very strongly in their religion. They hold tight to their religion. And I think the older community was an immigrant community. They felt like they were guests in this country. They experienced a lot of racism, but they just took it on the chin. And their main objective was to kind of fit in. Whereas my generation and generation of my children, we're British citizens. Most of us are born and bred here. We don't consider ourselves guests. And, we're not a guest community. We are citizens of this country with equal rights to any other citizen. And therefore, we are more confident in expressing ourselves. We speak English like the English people speak English, et cetera, et cetera. But we're also very in tune with our religious values, even perhaps to a greater extent than our parents.
And, I suppose then, kind of what you just led off with there, which is that maybe assimilation has failed. So when people like Nigel Farage say that, I mean, he's right then, isn't he?
Well, I don't really believe in assimilation. I think, Britain is allegedly a multicultural society where everyone can rub along together. I like the fact that it's a multicultural society. Some people might not, but I like the fact that we can, go down a high street in London and everyone's wearing different clothes, speaking different languages, different food. I think that enriches the country.
They're not all forming political movements, though, are they?
Well, ultimately, we've been taken for granted as a community, Patrick. And therefore, we feel the need to be organised, just like the LGBT community is organised and have formed a lobby group, serve the Jewish community, serve the Hindus. But unfortunately, when the Muslims do it, everyone thinks it takes on sinister undertones, which I think reveals racism and Islamophobia.
Interesting. I am quite intrigued to see how certain aspects of the British Muslim vote just get on with the mobilised block of LGBT support that you were saying there. What do you make of that? Because that could be a concern for people, right?
Ultimately, I think there's been a campaign to foist, kind of LGBT values on the Muslim community. And this is what we reject, because we have our own values. And in our religion, homosexuality is considered a sin. Obviously, we live in Britain, we obey British law, and, we should not target members of the LGBT community or anybody else. We should get along with them, in workplaces, in society in general. So there's no sense of targeting. It's just when, I guess, certain lobby groups try to impose those values on our children in schools, for example, that's where the backlash from us begins.
Well, it's also, to be fair, on that front, certainly not just the British Muslim community. I mean, I've got massive problems with that as well, and I know a huge amount of people do. I'm just going to ask you a question now. I would hope that you take this in good faith, because it is how I mean it. I'm genuinely intrigued. I think a lot of people are when it comes to the mobilisation of the British Muslim vote as a political force, right? Is the objective to be the dominant political force in Britain, the British Muslim vote, do you think?
No, I mean, that's ridiculous anyway, isn't it? Because what are we, 4 million people in this country, or 70 million? So we're I don't know what that is in percentage terms, 5-6% of the population. Even if we wanted it to be true, that ain't going to be true for hundreds of years. So I think it's more about, I would love everyone to become Muslim. I'll be honest about it. I would love the whole of Britain to become Muslim, because I believe Islam is the truth. And I believe that it is a wonderful thing for everybody. But the reality is we are a small minority in this country, and it's more about kind of protecting ourselves from Islamophobia and racism. Right. And it's kind of trying to project what we believe is an equitable foreign policy when it comes to things like genocide in Gaza. We don't believe our country, and this is our country, should be helping Israel slaughter and massacre the people of Gaza. So that's what it's all about, really. But obviously there's a lot of, anti-Muslim feeling in this country, whipped up by the mainstream media, even by GB News, I would say, and people are afraid because of that reason. I think it's false propaganda.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously I would take massive objection to that. I would say that, I think people do have a right to be slightly concerned about certain things that we are seeing going on in this country. But nonetheless, it has been an absolute pleasure.
Can I ask you like what, Patrick?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the rise of terrorism, right? I mean, that's an obvious thing as well. I think that is a concern for people. Yeah, well, I mean, obviously Islamist terrorism is a threat. I mean, I imagine that you would feel quite bad.
ISIS or Al-Qaeda, they don't represent Muslims. They're not from our community. We're not hiding them under our bed. They're just. That's
fine. Look, that is absolutely fine. I've not come on here, as I think you will understand from the start of this interview, to have a massive row with you about Islamophobia or anything in Britain. I was genuinely really intrigued about the Muslim vote in the latest polling, and we can have a discussion about extremism at another time if that's all right with you. But I am a little bit pressed, so I'm going to have to move it on, which we were doing anyway. But as the editor of the British Muslim News Organisation, there, 5 pillars, Roshan Mohammed Saleh. Thank you very, very much. I must say, it is rather frustrating sometimes when the best flashpoints of an interview come literally when I have to move on. But coming up, I have got a study. There's bad news for some of the tofu-scoffing vegans out there. Plus, the IDF releases its gripping helmet cam from its Hamas hostage rescue. Easy for me to say. But next, I do bring you the very first of tomorrow's front pages. It's Patrick Christys tonight on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. There will be fewer showers during the next 24 hours, with an increased chance of clear spells, particularly in the west as higher pressure moves in. But we keep the northerly airflow, so we keep that cool air with us. And as a result, where we do see clearing skies overnight, it is going to turn fairly chilly. The clearest skies will be across central and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, western England and Wales, although still the possibility of a shower or two running into West Wales and Cornwall. There'll also be some showers into the northeast of Scotland, eastern England, where there'll be more cloud, 10 Celsius here, but where we've got the clear skies further west, the potential for the mid-single figures by dawn. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful start to the day for much of central Scotland through the Highlands, Grampians, Western Isles as well. We've got this cloud cover into the Northern Isles and the far northeast of the mainland, giving a few light showers in places. Northern Ireland, though, mostly bright and dry first thing. Likewise for Northern England. Thicker cloud there for the east of England. Into the southeast, 1 or 2 showers about first thing, likewise for West Wales and Cornwall. But these are the exceptions, I think, for the vast majority. Blue skies and patchy cloud around first thing, but mostly dry. Now, as temperatures rise through the morning, there's always the possibility of the odd shower breaking out once again across eastern England. But for many, it's a fine and bright day. Still on the cool side, but the winds won't be quite as brisk. So I think it's going to feel a bit more pleasant. Temperatures of 18 Celsius, perhaps 19 in the south, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Another chilly start to the day on Thursday. Plenty of fine weather first thing, but in the west we've got the cloud building, the wind picks up, outbreaks of rain push into Northern Ireland, Western England and Wales by lunchtime, and in the east it turns cloudy by the afternoon as well. That rain clears to showers on Friday and into Saturday.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News. It's time to bring you tomorrow's news tonight now with the very first front pages. Let's do it. Right, I've got the Metro. Pop pedos 500k to victim. That's pretty on the nose there. Gary Glitter ordered to pay out over sex abuse. Let's go to the Eye. Labour promises £12 an hour to care workers. Every care worker in England will be entitled to new minimum wage if Labour wins power. And they will pledge in their manifesto, which is apparently, according to the Eye, going to be tomorrow. Manifesto will promise 1.5 million care workers they will get a new wage protection, all right? The Independent, Sunak's final gamble. I will cut taxes by £17 billion and migration by 50%. So there we go. Let's go to the Daily Telegraph. Sunak promises £17 billion in tax cuts. They've got Biden will respect the verdict after his son is convicted on gun charges. So there we are. Let's go as well to the Daily Mail. Rishi, don't give Labour a blank cheque. PM warns that Keir will change rules to hold power for a long time. I'm assuming he's talking about the votes for kids stuff there. Let's whiz it over to The Guardian. Tories, implausible £17 billion tax giveaway condemned. It is interesting, though, isn't it, with The Guardian, that they didn't seem to be saying that kind of stuff when Jeremy Corbyn was, announcing his manifesto, but then again, neither was Keir Starmer. So I suppose there we go. Right, OK, so those are your front pages. I am joined, as ever, by my wonderful panel, and here to do it all are columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, the deputy editor at The Spectator, Freddie Gray, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Right, I mean, yeah, look, we've obviously covered quite a bit of this stuff already, haven't we? The Tories promising to give a bit of money away, and tax cuts, etc. Labour promising £12 an hour for care workers. I suppose this again comes down to, doesn't it, where is this money really going to be coming from, Freddie?
Well, yeah, we're in the sort of golden candy phase of manifesto releases, where parties promise incredible things. And of course, as everybody knows, the Tories are in the hardest position because everybody will come back at them and say, you've been in power for so long and you haven't done any of this. And indeed, this sounds like a manifesto that would have been good in 2010. Now it sounds like something we know you can't deliver.
Yeah, and £12 an hour for care workers is not actually that good. 2 years ago, when I was did a bit of care work, it was £10.50. So 2 years later, after inflation going up to like 10%, you're giving them £1.50 extra. I actually think something that would be more clever is to try and recruit carers from the local community.
Or family members, actually.
Well, yes, but getting people within the local community to either do part-time caring work, obviously if they've passed through all the checks and all of that, because I don't think people realise how community-focused care work is. I mean, one of the people whose mothers I was caring for owned the local pub down the road, and he was very grateful to have someone up the road from her who knew her, who was actually embedded in her community. So I think that should probably be...
all right, look, I'm going to whiz it on, actually, because I've got this story here, which is potentially some quite bad news for all the self-righteous vegans out there who insist that their diet is the healthier option. You might be indulging in a dangerous fad. So a study from Sao Paulo University and Imperial College London has found that ultra-processed vegan foods can increase your risk of heart death. It was found that only plant-based diets that were restricted to whole foods protected the heart. Amy, I don't know, maybe going vegan isn't all it's cracked up to be.
I think that the truth about that story is it's just ultra-processed foods lead to heart death, and that's the problem. And the thing is, because the food industry has seen this vegan trend, they've jumped on it and made all this processed rubbish with vegan slapped on the front. So really, it's about ultra-processed foods.
Well, yeah, because
if you ate just vegan food, I like following this account, this Eddie Abu. Have you ever heard of him?
Oh yeah,
isn't he good?
Yeah, you know he's gonna.
Right, yeah, and this whole thing is if it looks like, how do you describe it? If it looks like you couldn't be grown, or then don't eat it.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? Because you get all these fake vegan steaks, and people have presumably spent quite a lot of money and effort making something that looks like someone's held a steak near a radiator for a bit and made it bleed.
It looks like cat food.
But then I think if you hate meat, why would you want to eat something that looks like a bleeding piece of meat?
Well, yes, and if you modify things structurally, you know, at an atomic level like that, it's going to have bad health consequences.
Yeah.
We know this. But I'm just pleased because my very sanctimonious vegan friends, Frank, if you're watching, you know, they've been lecturing me for ages about how not only am I immoral for eating meat, but also it's much worse for my health.
But no, if you did
and now I've got something to fight back.
properly,
like a raw
this is just about the ultra-processed side.
Well, a lot of these vegans.
Well, if you just eat plants,
the fact that they have to take supplements just shows that it's a suboptimal diet.
You need,
you need to take some. If you're a vegan, you have to take some sort of supplement.
It's true.
Just by that, it's suboptimal.
My husband was a vegan, and he feels so much better since
he's seen the light.
Started, and he did have to supplement his diet. It's true.
I mean, I don't want to sound like extreme, but I just think this whole veganism thing is just a Western fad. I mean, if you grew up in a country where you're grateful to have 3 square meals a day, you don't go say, oh, all I'm going to eat are these like ultra processed.
It's a great point. That's a great point.
It's crap.
It is exactly. It's one of those, I would argue, potentially quite luxury things that you can only do when, by definition, you've got too much food available.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, it's like a lot of the things that we have now. The only reason we can sit and ponder and think about things like unconscious bias all the time is because we've got nothing else on. Yeah, anyway, right, moving on. Nigel Farage was targeted while out campaigning today as a protester allegedly threw a cup of coffee and possibly wet cement at him whilst he was on an open-top bus. Shall we have a little look? And in the last couple of hours, Mr Farage said he would not surrender to the mob.
All I can say is that whilst it is concerning, and whilst, of course, it does make me thoughtful, and I may need to change tactics slightly, but I'm going to make one promise to you and the tens of thousands watching this live, online, and the media, and my promise is this: I will not surrender to the mob. I will not stop campaigning. This democratic process must continue.
Now, Joe Biden's continued campaign for re-election is bordering on cruel as his gaffes are becoming more and more frequent. Here he is, appearing to freeze during the Juneteenth celebration at the White House, stood next to his number 2, Kamala Harris, and bizarrely, George Floyd's brother. Watch.
For the rest of my life, all I wanna do is make you proud of me.
And then President Biden delivered his powerful message to the nation.
She knows so long as she was denied, our freedom can never be secured.
Yeah. Is that elder abuse?
It certainly is elder abuse, and the Biden presidency has been elder abuse ever since his candidacy in 2019. I met Biden briefly in February of 2020 in New Hampshire, and it was very clear to me then that he was already quite gaga. And I wrote a piece saying that at the time, and I got a lot of flack from it, saying, you know, this is just sort of Republican talking points of nasty gutter journalism from the right and stuff. But I was just saying what I thought of him after having met him. And it's become increasingly clear to me that he is not all there, and it's increasingly clear to the whole world and the American electorate, which is why Donald Trump
But
is
I guess
ahead in the polls.
if you could you say the same about his actual presidency, though, because he has been very effective in many ways.
Well, his administration has been, but the argument is no one voted for the Men in Black.
His job approval rating just dropped down to 37%, which is a new low.
Didn't the American deficit drop by like 1.7 trillion?
But is it democracy? I mean, this is the thing. It's not democracy, is it? You're voting for, excuse me, you're voting for somebody to lead the country, and he's obviously not leading it. You know, America's the land of the free and all that stuff, you know, the home of Western democracy, and I would argue that's not democracy, is it? There's no way he's even dressing himself.
Well, yeah, that's true. That being said, Trump is also showing some signs of cognitive decline. It might not be perfectly obvious because he's more animated and a bit more mad, quite frankly.
You're so right.
But you don't get to the ages of Biden and Trump without having some sort of mental slowdown. It's just a fact.
Well, quickly.
I'm just not sure Trump really is. I think for Trump's age, actually, he is surprisingly cognizant. And
why does he say so much mad stuff then?
Well, he's always
mad.
Coming up. The army of the unwashed has set its targets on the king. Plus, can you spot what's wrong with this picture? There we go. Yes, I will be revealing all next. But before that, I'll bring you some more of tomorrow's front pages, so stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
D-Day was shrouded in secrecy. Ken Hay was days away from landing in Normandy and still didn't know what was happening.
I don't think we really appreciated what we were going into. Actually, on D-Day, I was on a 30-mile route march, and we see the planes going over and that sort of thing. And we realised that wherever they were going, then we got the news that, in fact, it was Normandy, and we knew we were scheduled for that.
He arrived on Juno Beach at Coursieux-sur-Mer a few days after the main assault. The soldiers' role was to push forward into enemy territory.
I didn't land on D-Day. I landed shortly after in June. I was in the infantry, so I was a rifleman and I was up the front.
While on night patrol on July 7th, his unit was attacked.
My brother was a corporal in the same platoon, and he was out with me. He got back. 16 of us out of 30 got back. 5 of us got captured, and 9 got killed.
Germans put him to work in a POW camp in Zabas, Poland. With Soviets advancing, the prisoners were forced to march for 1,000 miles.
At one point along there, my leg was chopped. I lay down in the snow. If it hadn't been for 2 guys who fell back in the column and picked me up, I'd have just gone to sleep and frozen to death. 2 American tanks turned up on the 22nd of April, Sunday afternoon, and we were liberated.
Ken feels pride for the role he played in Normandy and thanks God for keeping him alive.
People say, why did you volunteer for the services? It was a completely different atmosphere then. You did your bit.
The People's Channel.
Right, it is time now for some more front pages. Let's do it. So, we've got the Times here. At PM, a vote for reform puts Labour into number 10. We have heard this a heck of a lot before, haven't we? Rishi Sunak issues a warning at the Tory manifesto launch. They've also got Hunter Biden guilty of buying a gun illegally. Let's go to Daily Express. Tory ambition to deport 100,000 illegal migrants. Rishi Sunak has fired up the election by promising to slash legal migration in half, with the Tory plan emerging to deport as many as 100,000 illegal migrants. This is really, I'm not quite sure those two things add up, because if he's wanting to slash legal migration, then that is not the same as deporting 100,000 illegal migrants, is it? That's deporting illegal migrants.
Which he should be doing anyway, and was actually done quite effectively under the Blair government.
Yeah, well,
which he doesn't want to say.
Deporting illegal migrants is one thing. If he wants to halve legal migration, then that would still leave us, by my calculations, with legal migration of somewhere in the region of 325,000. So I'm not entirely sure whether or not they've muddled up 2 things there. But as you can see, I am obviously joined by my press pack. It's columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, deputy editor at The Spectator Freddie Gray, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole-Turner. Look, we've spoken quite a lot about Rishi Sunak and immigration, and we did a whole section on it earlier on. So if you want, you can go and rewind on YouTube. But now, one of Taylor Swift's dancers has managed to temporarily snatch the headlines from the Star after he aired fears that he could be hounded for cultural appropriation for donning a kilt in Edinburgh. Cameron Saunders from St. Louis, Missouri, declared on Instagram that he felt it was appropriate to wear the garment, because the salesman gave him permission to wear it with pride after being given a history lesson on Scotland, which included tartans, the thistle and Scottish last names. Cameron said that he always wanted to be an authentic kilt, but wanted to be super respectful about the culture before buying it. Interesting, really, because I don't think that's an authentic kilt, is it? Either,
yeah, I'm glad he didn't open his legs. That would be deeply uncomfortable.
But very traditionally Scottish, right?
Well, yes, I mean, yes, if he...
In keeping in the tradition.
If the wind was blowing where the wind should not blow. Anyway, I think the whole concept of cultural appropriation is such a Western obsession.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many people in Scotland
I can't think of someone like...
Scotland don't care.
Well, yes, they don't care, but also, why... Like, if you have real problems in life, why would you think about that?
It's also true that
I think it's lovely, actually.
Yeah, but this is the
large
thing.
extent, the kilt to a large extent was a 19th century invention to make the Scots feel more, romantic.
Yeah, but isn't it just white rubbish?
It's certainly
Sorry, but it's just the
sounds like you've done your research. You're a respectful kilt wearer.
But this guy's just decided to bang on about it. He could have just went. He's in Scotland. He's performing in Scotland. When people go and play gigs all over the world, it's very common that they might wear like the national football shirt of where they're from, or
No, it's so
something like
different.
that.
Respect the fashion. I have these shoes. These are Christian Louboutin shoes. I would not wear them without a firm knowledge of the designer and the origins and the history. It's respecting fashion.
It's respecting fashion.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly.
Well, there we go.
And the French.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I mean, I just find that bonkers. This idea that it's cultural appropriation to wear a kilt, but then to wear a kilt as a full dress.
He was being on the side of caution. It's nice, it's sweet.
He's dancing for Taylor Swift, is that right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, dancing for Taylor
I hope
Swift.
he's not wearing the kilt while
I think it just shows how foreign Scottish people are to Americans. Like, that's great.
Well, look, I want to bring this clip to you, all right, because Israel's operation to save 4 hostages held by Hamas has, unsurprisingly, sparked controversy. The Hamas-run health ministry claims that 274 Palestinians were killed in the assault. The Israeli Defense Force says that their soldiers came under heavy fire from Hamas. Now the IDF has released gripping helmet cam footage of that hostage rescue operation. All right, well, I just thought I'd bring that to you because it's quite astonishing footage, really. But we are going to seamlessly segue into today's greatest Britain Union jackass. Right then, Esther, can I start with your greatest Britain, please?
Yes, so it's Michael Altheim, who's not British, he's German, he's a retired lorry driver, and he lost all 4 fingers on his right hand in a work accident, but he's now been fitted with a 3D printer device by a British company called Hero Gauntlet, which now allows him to grip and hold things, which is very cool. He can, move on with his life.
I mean, it's a rogue shout. I'm not saying he's undeserving of it, but it's an interesting shout.
He's a robot man.
Yeah.
But he has a robot hand. It's cool.
Fine. OK. Yeah, fine. Yeah. All right, Freddie.
My Great Britain at the moment is this the Britain's hardest geezer, Russ Cook, who's nobly set off to Germany. He's running to Germany for the Euros.
For the beer.
He says he hopes he'll be able to come back with them after they've won the tournament. I have my doubts about Gareth Southgate's selection, so I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, he might be back. He might be back next week, whenever.
Back very quickly.
All right, fair enough. Go on, Amy.
I've picked Nshuti Gatwa, who plays not only Eric in Sex Education, is how I know him, but he's a Doctor Who. And in Doctor Who, they had their first same-sex kiss this week. Woohoo!
I saw that and I was like, Doctor Who cares? Because
I tell you why it struck me, because I'm writing a book about Margaret Thatcher and I'm writing a chapter about Section 28 and what it was like to live under Section 28 and the impact it had on teenagers. And I think if you're a 14-year-old boy at home and you see this, it affirms who you are and it's brilliant. And that's
right, lovely stuff. I think we
they're
might
more
be able to
fun
play.
by
I think for the avoidance of doubt, we can play a little clip of this, can we?
Beautiful.
All right, apparently that's powerful and lovely and strong. So today's Greatest Britain winner is the hardest geezer, which, given the clip I've just played to you, might actually need some narrowing down. Let's go to the Union jackass now. Go on, Esther.
Animal Rising, it had to be them for defacing that portrait of King Charles. I'm sure all the poor badgers were screaming with victory because they did that. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. Also, I didn't really quite get that. And there were cameras set up for it. It needs a lot of explanation. Let's go, Freddie, to your one.
I'm afraid mine's a bit more of a tricolor jackass, because I'm going with Emmanuel Macron, who's having a spectacularly bad week. He performed so badly in the elections because he's so inept as President of France that he has called some fresh elections, and it may be a big mistake.
OK, we'll wait and see. Go on, Amy, quickly.
It's a Holly Valance. She hasn't worked in 20 years. She's married to a billionaire. But this week, she hosted a £40,000 per head cocktail party to raise funds for Donald Trump.
Oh, you're just jealous. You're just jealous. You couldn't get people to spend 40 grand to have cocktails with you, could you? That's what it all stems
I'll
from.
have a go.
All right, you'll have a go. All right, OK. Today's winner of the Union Jackasses is Animal Rising. There we go. So there we are. Right, look, thank you very much. Been quite an eclectic mix today. As ever, I do wish that we always had a little bit more time on this show, but alas, it's headliners next for a more in-depth look in their inimitable way at all of your front pages. Thank you very much for having me back after a few days off. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. Take it easy.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. There will be fewer showers during the next 24 hours, with an increased chance of clear spells, particularly in the west as higher pressure moves in. But we keep the northerly airflow, so we keep that cool air with us. And as a result, where we do see clearing skies overnight, it is going to turn fairly chilly. The clearest skies will be across central and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland and Western England and Wales, although still the possibility of a shower or two running into West Wales and Cornwall. There'll also be some showers into the northeast of Scotland, eastern England, where there'll be more cloud, 10 Celsius here, but where we've got the clear skies further west, the potential for the mid-single figures by dawn. Nevertheless, it's a beautiful start to the day for much of central Scotland through the Highlands, Grampians, Western Isles as well. We've got this cloud cover into the Northern Isles and the far northeast of the mainland, giving a few light showers in places. Northern Ireland, though, mostly bright and dry first thing. Likewise for Northern England. Thicker cloud there for the east of England. Into the southeast, 1 or 2 showers about first thing, likewise for West Wales and Cornwall. But these are the exceptions, I think, for the vast majority. Blue skies and patchy cloud around first thing, but mostly dry. Now, as temperatures rise through the morning, there's always the possibility of the odd shower breaking out once again across eastern England. But for many, it's a fine and bright day. Still on the cool side, but the winds won't be quite as brisk. So I think it's going to feel a bit more pleasant. Temperatures of 18 Celsius, perhaps 19 in the south, mid-teens generally elsewhere. Another chilly start to the day on Thursday. Plenty of fine weather first thing.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
What about the elections? Because it seems that the King and everything is moving because of it, and we've got a lot of royal engagements and things that happen at this time.
Yes, well, you know, it means that he has to take more time and be at home. He can't go to all the things he wants to do. He's been doing 5 a day, which is probably made Camilla a bit cross. But what they still hope is that they can get the Japanese Emperor and Empress over. That's in July. That they can go to France for the 80th anniversary of the fighting. And he will be able to do 1 or 2 things. And Ascot he's very keen to do. Now, those aren't things that are political in any way. Just want to talk about Harry and Charles's argument, where Harry said he didn't want to stay, he wanted to go to a hotel. And it's come out now that actually King Charles it's believed that he was offered St James's, and Princess Anne stays